Aryna Sabalenka facing investigation over dirty tactics against Eala, and nobody saw it coming. Yes, Sabalenka, the powerhouse of women's tennis, suddenly under fire for what happened against the rising Filipina star. One moment on court, one whispered complaint, and the entire match flipped on its head. Fans didn't just sense tension, they felt the shockwave ripple through the arena. Because whatever Sabalenka did that night, it didn't look like normal gamesmanship. Those subtle gestures, the long pauses, the stare-downs, everything felt engineered. And when Eala finally confronted the chair umpire, the crowd realized something was seriously wrong. Screenshots spread, accusations grew louder, and tennis authorities were forced to step in. Now the question is simple. Was Sabalenka just being competitive? Or did she cross a line she can't walk back from? Everything begins long before the controversy exploded. Long before hashtags, screenshots, and investigations filled the timeline. It begins in the quiet stretch between tournaments. That space where ambition sharpens, where pressure grows silently, shaping champions and challengers alike. Aryna Sabalenka had spent years carving her name into the sport with fire and brutality. Her rise was meteoric, her presence undeniable, a storm wrapped in muscle and resolve. Fans admired her for that raw, unfiltered power. Her opponents feared the way she could bend a match to her will with nothing but a glare and a violently perfect serve. She wasn't just a top seed, she was the standard. But every era meets its disruption. And for Sabalenka, it arrived in the form of Alexandra Eala, the fearless Filipina sensation, whose rise felt less like a climb and more like a detonation. Eala wasn't supposed to threaten the tour this early. She wasn't supposed to stand toe-to-toe with veterans who had spent a decade in the trenches. Yet somehow she did. Every step she took into the spotlight seemed to rattle the hierarchy. Every upset she delivered added one more wrinkle to the calm top players believed they controlled. She played with youth, yes, but also with something dangerous. Belief. Real tangible belief that she belonged among the elite. And belief like that can unnerve even the toughest champions. As Eala's momentum grew, rumors began swirling, the kind that spark in locker rooms, simmer in press conferences, and explode online. Was she rising too quickly? Was her confidence being mistaken for arrogance? Or was something else happening, something deeper? The seed of tension between Sabalenka and Eala didn't sprout overnight. It began subtly. A cold handshake here, a clipped phrase there. Nothing anyone could point to specifically, but enough for fans to begin whispering. Why does Sabalenka look irritated every time Eala's name comes up? Is this rivalry real or personal? By the time the tour reached their shared event, the air was already heavy. A veteran defending her territory. A newcomer refusing to bow. Two meteors on a collision course. When they finally crossed paths again, even before the alleged dirty tactics, even before the so-called investigation, you could feel the electricity. Athletes talk about energy shifts, but this wasn't a shift. It was a fault line forming beneath their feet. Eala entered the court smiling, energized, light on her feet. Sabalenka walked in stone-faced, jaw tightened, shoulders squared like a warrior entering familiar battle. Crowds didn't need commentary to understand what they were witnessing. The first few rallies alone told the story. Power against precision, intensity against instinct, dominance against hunger. And for the first time in a long time, Sabalenka felt pushed not by a top-5 rival, not by a Grand Slam champion, but by a teenager with nothing to lose and everything to prove. In those early exchanges, you could sense the fracture forming, not in their games, but in their dynamic. Something about Eala's poise seemed to ignite something stubborn in Sabalenka, something territorial, something that whispered, "She's not taking my spot." It was only the beginning. The match hadn't even reached its turning point, and yet the tension was thick enough to cut with a racket. What happened next? The controversial gestures, the accusations, the storm that would drag Sabalenka into a fictional investigation, all of it was set into motion right here. Two players, one court, a rivalry ready to erupt. And the world hadn't yet realized this wasn't just another match. It was the spark that would ignite everything. Something shifted the moment the second set began. Something subtle but powerful enough to tilt the entire atmosphere on court. Nobody could quite describe it. Not the analysts, not the commentators, not even the fans watching from the upper rows, but everyone could feel it because Sabalenka, usually a fortress of composure and intimidation, suddenly began acting different. It started with the pacing. Sabalenka stretched her routines longer than usual, bouncing the ball 15, 16, sometimes 17 times before a serve. Fans noticed, I noticed, the umpire noticed. At first, it seemed like nerves, the kind that sometimes get to even most experienced champions. But then came the glances, sharpened, timed, unmistakably intentional. Not the usual competitive stare-downs Sabalenka was known for. No, these were colder, aimed directly at Eala's rhythm. Eala's body language tightened. Her service motion slowed. A young player's confidence can be a fragile thing, and Sabalenka seemed to be testing every crack. Then came the moment that changed everything. Midway through a tense rally, I looked toward the chair umpire, not to complain, not to argue, but because Sabalenka had let out a deep, guttural noise at the exact moment I was about to swing. It wasn't a normal grunt. It wasn't even part of the rally. It felt timed. Eala paused, resetting her feet. Sabalenka stood tall at the baseline, expression unreadable, and that's when the whisper started. What was that? Did she do that on purpose? Is Sabalenka trying to disrupt her? Normally, one odd moment wouldn't stir much attention, but this was only the beginning. On the very next point, Sabalenka delayed her serve again, not by seconds, but nearly half a minute. She walked to her towel, then back to the baseline, then paused, staring directly at Eala as the crowd grew restless. Eala shifted her weight, unsure whether to reset or wait. More murmurs, more frustrated looks. And when Sabalenka finally tossed the ball for the serve, she stopped mid-motion, caught the ball, and smirked. A tiny gesture, but when captured by slow-motion replay, it lit social media like gasoline. Screenshots began spreading online. Sabalenka staring down Eala. Sabalenka pausing too long. Sabalenka disrupting play. Fans started piecing together every moment as if assembling evidence in a courtroom. Is she using dirty tactics? Why is Sabalenka acting like this? The moment Eala found herself playing two opponents, the one across the net and the one inside her own mind. The moment that would soon spark a fictional investigation. Because from here on, everything got worse. If the tension inside the stadium was explosive, what happened outside was nuclear. The moment clips from the match hit social media, the narrative spun out of Sabalenka's control. Fans, journalists, former players, everyone had an opinion, and none of them were quiet about it. What started as small murmurs in the crowd began turning into full-blown digital outrage within minutes. It began with a single clip. Sabalenka pausing mid-serve, staring at Eala, smirking, then walking off to reset again. A slow-motion repost on X, formerly Twitter, labeled it simply mind games or dirty tactics. Within an hour, the video had crossed 500,000 views. Then came the angle where Sabalenka appeared to grunt before Eala's swing. A tiny disruption in real time, but in replay unmistakably sharp. Fans zoomed in, froze frames, added captions. Every detail became part of a growing body of evidence. A viral tennis blogger posted, "This isn't competitiveness. This is psychological warfare." Another fan wrote, "If a younger player did this to Sabalenka, she'd explode." By late afternoon, even neutral analysts began weighing in. One former pro known for her calm takes tweeted, "Gamesmanship is part of the sport, but there are limits." This crossed one, and once the commentators weighed in, the wildfire became unstoppable. Reaction channels uploaded minute-by-minute breakdowns. Sports influencers discussed it as the most uncomfortable match of the season. Filipina fans rallied behind Eala, calling out what they saw as bullying behavior from a veteran against a rising star. Memes flooded timelines. Comparisons were drawn. Narratives hardened. But the real blow came when a courtside mic picked up a faint line during Sabalenka's frustrated muttering. A line that wasn't fully audible, but sounded dangerously like an insult. The audio is muddy, distorted, undeniably unclear. But online audiences don't wait for clarity. They decide. They judge. They attack. Within hours, #StandWithAla began trending in multiple Asian countries. Another hashtag emerged. #InvestigateSabalenka. Fictional, but treated as gospel by tens of thousands of users. Fans began tagging tennis officials, demanding transparency, demanding statements, demanding consequences. Clips of Eala calmly talking to the umpire were shared repeatedly, framed as proof of the pressure she endured. Side-by-side breakdowns compared the rising star's restraint with Sabalenka's escalating irritation. Suddenly, the match wasn't the story. The controversy was. By the next morning, the fictional tennis authority released a short, vague message saying they were reviewing footage from the event for potential sportsmanship concerns. They didn't name Sabalenka. They didn't mention Eala. They didn't specify details, but everyone already knew. News outlets seized the headline. Authorities reviewing Sabalenka-Eala match amid unsportsmanlike conduct claims. Sabalenka's camp responded with silence. A silence that the public interpreted as guilt. Her fan base tried to defend her, but the arguments were drowned beneath the tidal wave of outrage. Meanwhile, Alexandra Eala posted a short message online. Respect is part of the game. I hope we all remember that. Just 8 words. Calm, controlled, yet devastating. The comment section exploded. She handled this with class. Queen behavior. This is what a real athlete sounds like. Eala wasn't attacking anyone. She wasn't demanding punishment. She wasn't feeding the fire. But the world took her silence as strength and Sabalenka's silence as something else entirely. And so the fictional investigation gained momentum not because of what Sabalenka did or didn't do, but because the world had already decided what the truth should be. The rivalry was now bigger than the court, bigger than the match, bigger than the sport. What began as tension had become a global storm. Now there was no turning back. In the weeks that followed, the noise slowly faded, but the impact didn't. Scandals come and go in sports, but this fictional collision between Sabalenka's intensity and Eala's rising fire left an imprint that wouldn't disappear with a statement or a headline change. Because some rivalries aren't built from victories or rankings. Some are forged in tension, in misunderstandings, in the cracks between ambition and emotion. Sabalenka returned to the tour with a quiet heaviness. The kind that sits in the chest of a champion who has been forced to face her reflection and doesn't entirely like what she sees. She played well. She fought hard. But something inside her had changed. Her edges felt softer, not weaker, but more aware. The glare that once intimidated didn't linger as long. The pauses between points were shorter, more disciplined. It wasn't an apology. It was an evolution. Eala, on the other hand, didn't rise. She soared. Not because of sympathy, not because of viral clips, but because the world had seen her withstand pressure that would have broken many seasoned players. Her calm became her strength. Her poise became her signature, and her story became an anchor for young athletes who wanted proof that grace can win battles, too. Fans began calling her the future, not because of her ranking, but because of her resilience. She didn't need to speak loudly. She let the sport speak for her. And yet, despite their contrasting paths, their stories felt tied together, almost destined. Wherever Sabalenka played, someone mentioned Eala. Wherever I played, someone brought up that tense match, the delays, the glances, the spark that ignited a global conversation. A fictional investigation might have closed, but the rivalry that lived on. Journalists began to ask the question openly, will they meet again? And what will it look like this time? Some imagined a fiery rematch full of intensity and pressure. Others envisioned a moment of mutual respect at the net. 2 players acknowledging the storm that shaped them both. Fans debated endlessly, choosing sides, switching sides, creating new narratives. Because that's the thing about rivalries. They don't disappear. They evolve. They deepen. But perhaps the most striking part of the story wasn't the tactics, the investigation.